Hi, my name is Will and I'm a serial guitar botherer and also a massive Nick Cave fan. And if you too are a musician and a Nick Cave fan, which you probably are if you're watching this, you will know that Nick's main songwriting partner these days, Warman Ellis, when he's not playing a violin, he's playing a funny little guitar, and that's a tenor guitar. You can buy them, his signature tenor guitars. They're made by Eastwood, and I haven't played one. I expect they're awesome, but I really couldn't justify spending the £700 or £800 that was going to cost. So I put my engineering mind to working out a cheaper equivalent for me. The main difference between a normal guitar and a tenor guitar: firstly, they've got 4 strings, not 6. Secondly, they're kind of little. And that's to do with the tunings you're trying to achieve. You can go to a shorter scale length, which is the distance between the bridge and the nut here, and get the right kind of string tension so that your strings aren't all pinging off. So in the same way that a baritone guitar has a very long neck, and then you can get low tunings and still get string tension that's not like rubber bands boinging about. For higher tunings, a short scale length is helpful. There are a couple of ways of doing this. You want to get about 3/4 of the scale of a normal standard full-size electric guitar if you want a donor guitar for this. The full-size guitar scale isn't an exact thing. It depends a lot on whether you're a Fenderophile or a Gibson geek, and various other manufacturers have other slightly different scales, but similarly, it's not an exact science on a tenor guitar, but you want about 3/4 of a full-size guitar scale. The easiest way to just go and buy a donor guitar the right kind of size is to get one of these, which is a Fender Jazzmaster Mini. Sorry, it's a Fender Squier Jazzmaster Mini. That's very important, because this will only cost you maybe 120 quid new, probably 50 or 60 quid second hand. Oops, dropped it. I've got another one for the Nick Cave fans. This is the Hannah Montana kids guitar. They're actually made by Washburn, so they're decent guitars, and this is another good donor guitar to start off with to make your tenor guitar. There are 3 main areas you need to look at to convert this. Firstly, and obviously, it's the bridge. That would normally have 6 string saddles equally spaced here. What you need to do is take out the middle ones, leave the outside 2 where they are, take out the middle ones, and re-drill at equal spacings to fit these saddles and strings. Now, because I'm a metal worker and it's easy for me, I've welded up the old holes of those middle string saddles, because I was a bit worried that my new holes were going to be either so close that they'd make a weak spot, or possibly that the drill would want to kind of wiggle into an old hole as I was drilling them. I think you could probably do it without the welding if you haven't got access to that. If you have got access to a MIG welder or know someone that has, it's just a very simple splat, 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 and you can fill up those old holes. The one thing I would warn you about is, though, if you're welding through chrome, there are some horrible toxic fumes that come from chrome when it gets overheated. So, for God's sakes, ideally use a welding mask with an air-fed, filtered air supply to you. Second best, do it outside or with a really good extractor or really good ventilation. My workshop's got a big open door either end, and it's constantly like a wind tunnel. So hopefully I'm not going to kill myself doing this. Be careful, kids. Next bit you have to alter is the nut. Now, there are books to be written on nut filing nut slots. For the luthiers among you, you're probably throwing up your hands in horror. If I was making this guitar to sell, or probably even if I was going to play it live, I would start with a fresh nut. But for this, which was a bit of an experiment for me, there was no need. I've just filed new slots for these 2. Also, I've deepened the slots for the outer 2, because on a new guitar, most second-hand guitars, the nut slots are never filed deep enough, and it gives you a really horrible action, particularly if you're playing like F chord type things. And also kind of puts the guitar slightly out of tune. If you're having to push that string down a long way, you are adding to the tension on the string, and you're putting the guitar, the tuning up, and it'll sound out of tune with the open strings. There are various ways you can file nut slots. It's much easier if you've got a proper set of files, which I have, but they're very expensive. Use your ingenuity if you haven't, and practice on a cheap guitar. One website and Facebook site I would recommend is Reloved Guitars. It's a guy called Sam Deeks, and for general guitar setups and maintenance and tips and tricks and demystifying the whole thing, he's brilliant. He's got a couple of ebooks that you can buy, and I would thoroughly recommend them. I'm not affiliated. Finally, you've got to fill in the holes where the original inner machine heads went. Don't use filler. Filler isn't as good as the manufacturers tell you. It's really not much good for this sort of thing. Use wood glue and the right size dowel. You can buy these dowels with kind of serrations on the side. Normally you can buy one to fit exactly. If you can't, you can drill this out slightly. Glue them in, sand them back down. You can do it as neatly as you like. I've not got a matching colour, but I have sanded them down nice and neatly. And then measure this space between these two into 3 and drill your holes there and there and refit 2 of the machine heads. I've also added this bar as a string tree for the outer 2 because the string tree that came with this wasn't suitable for these spacings. Incidentally, on the nut, you will probably be close enough if you just divide this space into 3 to get those strings right. In theory, you want the gaps equal, and because of the difference in gauge of the strings, the center lines of these won't be equally in thirds, but it's a very fine point on something like this. Couple of tips and tricks. I would go to the Eastwood sites who sell the signature tenors. There's a lot of stuff about tunings and string gauges there. I personally would say don't buy sets of tenor guitar strings. They'll charge you more than a 6-string set, and you can just buy a 6-string set, extract the ones you want, and you've got some spares for your other guitars left over. The tuning generally, Warman Ellis seems to use, is G, D, A and E. And when you're tuning a guitar without a tuner, each string fretted on the 7th fret gives the tuning for the next string. It's tuned in, it's what they call standard tenor fifths. And that does songs like Higgs Boson Blues and Jubilee Street. So Higgs Boson Blues goes something like... I'll do a proper tutorial on that sometime. Jubilee Street is also on a guitar like this, tuned this way. That's about all I've got to say. I'll show you very briefly the Hannah Montana version. I managed to pick up a Hannah Montana Disney guitar, which is this. Yay! Which again, if you're a big Nick Cave fan and you know Higgs Boson Blues, you'll know the significance of that. This took a little bit more adaptation. Same thing on the bridge. In fact, the bridge that came with this I particularly disliked, and I did swap it over. I still found when I fitted this one, I had to do the same adaptation as on the other one to fit these 2 saddles equally spaced. There really wasn't enough tension here as the string went over these saddles, so I also added a small shim to the neck, which pushes the whole thing outwards and gave me a better tension there, and it now plays much better. One other thing I'll mention is I fitted a blade pickup to this. Don't worry too much if you've got a standard 6-pole single coil or humbucking pickup and the poles don't line up with the strings. As far as I can tell, it makes next to no difference to the sound when it goes through an amplifier. I did think I'd try it on this, I have. Unfortunately, these double rail pickups, whether they're single coil or humbucking, they tend to come as very high gain heavy metal pickups, which you don't particularly want for this. This particular one comes from Warman, very reasonable cost, and it's called a Tele pickup, and it's just a reasonably medium low output pickup rather than something that's very, very heavy metal and high gain. And that's worked very well. On this guitar, a bit easier. I've just used the outer 4 machine heads, haven't bothered drilling anything new, and removed the machine heads from the middle there. Same thing on the nut, cut new slots for these here. Hopefully that's helpful. It might save you a few good, if you want to dabble in tenor guitars and you're of a DIY kind of frame of mind. These go on Marketplace for anything between 50 and 100 quid. Bear in mind you will probably have to shim the neck. You'll probably have to adjust the truss rod because these come awfully set up. It's a really sad thing that most guitars made for beginners or kids come so badly set up that they're almost impossible to play even if you're an experienced guitarist. I'm afraid the market probably decides that and they just don't spend the money on setting them up. But either this or the Squier Mini Jazzmaster or Mini Strat will all convert into a very nice little tenor guitar for you. I hope that's been helpful. I'm Will. I'll do some tenor guitar tutorials in due course.